Hello, so we are now in Paris with Stan Tapiero, who is founder of 10T Fund. It's a private equity growth fund which invests in mid-size and large-size companies around digital asset ecosystem. Great to have you here, Dan.
Yeah, nice to be here in Paris. Yeah.
So, can you tell us about your background? And you were into institutional investments, traditional investments before, and
Sure.
how did you shift into crypto world?
Sure. Yeah, I was 25 years in the macro hedge fund world, and I was a portfolio manager and trader, and I worked for some well-known companies, Tiger Management and SAC Capital and Duquesne. These are investors from the old world that most people know. I also started two businesses from scratch. One of them was a physical gold business where we sell and store gold called GBI, which today is the fourth largest vaulter of gold, third largest vaulter of gold in the world outside of the banking system. I also started another company called Agcoa in '06, which was a private farmland REIT, which by 2013 had become the largest private farmland REIT in the US, and we ended up selling it to the Canadian pension fund system for $450 million in 2013. So I'd started, a little bit of a different experience that I was managing a macro portfolio, so bonds, currencies, commodities, emerging markets, but then at the same time started these two businesses, and it was through the gold business in 2014 that I was introduced to Bitcoin because we integrated with a firm called BitReserve, which today is the Uphold wallet. You might know it. And we were the first place that you could buy and sell gold to buy and sell Bitcoin. And so, that was my introduction. But at the time, it was very small. It was only $10 billion of market value in Bitcoin. And I was used to trading these very liquid markets. Currencies, as you know, trade trillions of dollars a day. So I kind of ignored it. And then it wasn't until late 2018, early 19, after the collapse, Bitcoin collapse was up at, 20,000, comes down to 3, 4,000. And then I said, okay, well, I've seen this in the regular markets, in the traditional markets, where you have a huge boom and then something goes down 90%. It's usually always it's going to zero or it's a buy opportunity. So I said, okay, well, I tried to understand Bitcoin and I found it very difficult, very hard to get through the 8-page white paper. I wasn't a mathematician or cryptographer or computer programming. I didn't know about any of that. So every time I tried to understand what Bitcoin was, I gave up stupidly. I mean, I wish I hadn't. But in Q1 of 19, I didn't give up. So I bought Bitcoin and Ethereum in my own entity, which is DTAP Capital. And then, I fell down the rabbit hole, 6 months of 10 hours a day of reading, digging, listening to podcasts, maybe just like yours. And finally got to a place where I said, oh my goodness, I think this is the future. This is the biggest macro opportunity that I've ever seen. Bigger, certainly, than all the other things that I'd looked at before. So that was my initial foray into it. And then in the middle of 19, I had my position in DTAP, and I just thought, okay, well, what do I do now? I think this is the future. The smartest sort of under 30-year-old people that I ever met, were in the space. And I just thought, I'd like to own a portfolio of companies, but I'm not a venture capitalist. I'm not a technologist. I wasn't going to be able to, look at the code of the different chains and make a determination, which ones were going to, grow the most. So I thought, all right, look, I want a broad, diversified portfolio to the mid to late stage companies. So the companies, already making 50, 60 million in revenue, 500 million market cap and above. And I said, okay, I'd like to build a portfolio of those companies and launch 10T. And today we have over $1 billion in AUM. We've made 17 investments in the space. And as far as I know, we're still the only fund that exclusively and only does these mid to late stage companies in the DAE. You have people like Tiger and Cohen. They come in and they'll do, investments, but it's not their sole focus. So that's all we do. And, it's been great experience. The one really remarkable thing has been just how quickly everything has grown. 18 months ago, there were 14 companies in the world in the crypto blockchain space that had a valuation of over $1 billion. 14. Would you guess how many there are today? This is from 18 to 20 months ago. Take a guess.
Maybe 5-7 times more.
Okay, so there are over 100. So it's even more, about 8, right? Of 7. It's quite a lot in such a short period of time. And people don't realize that there are only 1,000 unicorns in the world. So now 10% of all the private businesses in the world that are unicorns are crypto businesses. It was not like that even 18 months ago.
The industry is growing quite rapidly.
Yeah, I'd say, yeah.
And you chose the name for the fund 10T. Can
Yeah.
you tell the story about it?
Yeah. Well, so 10T stands for 10 trillion. And so when I was coming up with the idea for the fund, the value of the digital asset ecosystem was 300 billion. So the value of Bitcoin, Ethereum, all the cryptocurrencies, and all the equity in the space. It's middle of 19, 300 billion. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do something that's more bold than any fund manager has ever done. And I said, I'm going to put my view, which is sort of a crazy view, into the name of my fund. So I said, the space is going to go up 30 times in 10 years. And so we say 10T in 10 years, from 300 billion to 10 trillion. So 30x. So I don't know anybody who said before they've even launched their fund, 30x is what the space is going to grow, and we'll put the name in the fund. And the joke of the matter really is that I'm going to be wrong about it because it's already 3T today after 2 years. So I think for sure it's going to be over 10T over the next 8 years, right? So the joke is that I wasn't bullish enough. Yeah.
And what about market cycles? Do you see the continuation of the bullish bull market, or do you see the drop for the next years or something?
No, I think we're still in a bull phase. Bitcoin has basically been 40 to 60,000 for over a year, a range. That's the way I see it. I'm not trading every little squiggle. There's no difference in my mind between 40, 50, 60,000. This is all the same price. It's a range. Ethereum has had a massive move though. It's up at least 20 times from, the summer of 20, right? It's just, and now it's consolidating around 3,000. So I don't know. I think I don't focus on so much the projects. I think Bitcoin and Ethereum are a little different. They have network effect. They're important to the ecosystem. They're not going anywhere. The other ones are still, to me, venture projects. Some of them will be successful, some won't. We leave that to Andreessen and Pantera and, Parafite. We let them make those calls. But I think the space is just consolidating. Yeah, and the impact on the companies has been de minimis. Yeah, Q1 slowed down a little bit, but we have companies' revenues improved in Q1, even though volume came down quite a lot.
And in your personal portfolio, do you have as well Bitcoin, Ethereum, any other?
Yeah, I just have Bitcoin and Ethereum, and I have it in cold storage. I don't stake, and I just leave it, and it's out of my mind, and I don't think about it, and it grows nicely. And I still think we're going to go to somewhere between 300 and 500,000 Bitcoin before we kind of take a rest. I think 50,000 was my initial place of resting because that's $1 trillion of market value. Makes sense to me. And I think Ethereum, can certainly go up now that they've constrained supply by burning so much, which I don't know that was that necessary that they did it, but it felt to me like the Bitcoiners kind of guilted them into reducing supply. You know, there's this big debate on Twitter about a year ago, and then they started burning. So I think that could easily be another three to five times in 12 to 18 months. Look, every time I've had a prediction, it's not been bullish enough. So I don't know what to I don't know what to do. But I don't think we're in a 18 type bear phase. No.
And in your opinion, what will be the main factor of such a growth of Bitcoin to 500K?
What will be the main what?
The main factor of the growth of Bitcoin.
Well, I think it's just general adoption. I mean, to be honest, we're following a very clear trajectory. And I say often that it's like 1997, I think, in the development of the internet. And there's a reason for saying that, is that in 97, 2% of the world had access to the internet. Today, around 2 to 3% have crypto accounts or wallets, okay? And so we know this space has been growing actually more quickly than the adoption of the internet happened. And if you look at the following 10 years, from 97 to 07, internet adoption rate increased by 15 times. 15 times. So, I think it's a structural, natural development. And if we go from 2% of the world today having crypto accounts, could we be 30 to 40% in 10 years? Sure. Absolutely. So, yeah. And again, my views have all not been bullish enough, generally. So,
and you seem to be quite risk averse. Like in your portfolio, you have only Bitcoin and Ethereum, and as well with your fund, you don't invest into seed stage companies. You invest into companies which are already found its market fit. So can you tell more about
so
this?
let me just say this: you're the first person who I've come across in 2.5 years who's called me risk averse. So I'll remember this interview. But you're actually right a little bit in categorizing it that way. Most of my investors are people from the legacy world, and they're successful, portfolio managers, hedge fund managers. I've got institutional investors, the state of Michigan pension fund, MERS. They've invested a big chunk of money with me. I have another Texas state pension fund. They legally actually are not allowed to own cryptocurrency. So we have some, endowments and foundations and family offices. And I found that they're all very familiar with private equity, and they're familiar with growth equity. And a lot of them, the first foray into crypto, blockchain, Bitcoin world is us. They don't own anything. They don't understand it. And they say, well, I understand private equity. I understand a business that's making, 300-400 million in revenue, that has offices around the world, that has a product, market fit, it has a niche. And it just makes it much easier to bring people into this world. If I start talking about, token economics, or I say, well, the Bitcoin is really backed by the proof of work algorithm, I've lost like half the people already. No, literally. And again, there's a lot of institutional money that's sitting there on the sidelines, not knowing what to do. And, I feel like part of my role is bringing them in, explaining things in a simple way. I feel like I'm a translator, most of the time. But I think, look, having Bitcoin and Ethereum isn't necessarily risk averse. It depends how much of it you have. I had a much smaller amount, but now it's grown to a much larger amount. But I think, look, with only 2% of the world with crypto accounts or wallets, you can see how much room there is left for adoption. And I think it's hard. It took me several years to get to a place where I had, where I was comfortable, where I understood what I was buying. And so in a sense, yes, you're right. It is a little risk-averse way. My friends in the Bitcoin crypto world, they say, oh, Dan, you're doing crypto for boomers. is what they say. And you know, there's some truth to that. But look, it's a big market, and it's a different risk-reward profile. I mean, venture capital and all the funds that you know, the famous funds, that investment style, it doesn't really suit me. I mean, you make 10 investments, 9 go to zero, and 1 is Google, right? And I don't like having any investments go to zero. So, and you know, I just don't, you know, I think we're going to make 5 to 10 times return on our portfolio. Now, you may say, well, so what? I made 80,000% return in Solana last year, right? So who cares? Well, you can put more money to work, and the risk reward is different, right? Less risk, but still to make 5, 10 times return in the next 5, 6, 7 years, I think we're going to do that. It's not so bad.
And what percentage of your portfolio is in crypto?
It's over 50%. Yeah.
And you were into gold, you have as well gold business.
Yes.
And Bitcoin is considered to be a digital gold. So how do you consider these two assets?
Well, right. I do have my gold business, and I do have gold. Look, I think there's some part of Bitcoin that is store of value, digital gold. But Bitcoin is much more than that. You know, Bitcoin, I mean, essentially is programmable. I mean, think about programmable money. It's kind of a crazy concept. You know, it's hard for people to get their head around it. And then now you have Lightning, which is on top. You can build on top of some of the other chains as well. I mean, look, this is what we're living through now, is the digitization of all value. That's what this is. And so gold is a great store of value, and I think the best hedge for the legacy system. So what do I mean? I think bonds, there are $200 trillion of bonds out there, cash and bonds that are, most of it is negative real yielding. I don't think that's very interesting for an investor. But for the last 30 plus years, 40 years really, since 81, every time the equity market has had a wobble or there was a recession, your bond portfolio kicked in and helped offset some of the losses. So it was a perfect hedge in a way. But now it's not. And with yields still so low, that whole asset class has been neutered. It can't act as the hedge for your portfolio. So I think there's a possibility that gold could have a renaissance now. I know I have a different view. Most Bitcoiners hate gold, but it's not my view. I think that certainly institutions own almost no gold. And they're sitting with these large equity portfolios, but they don't really have a hedge. You know, gold, if we have another downturn, they won't be able to cut interest rates much below zero. It won't be able to offset, but they'll be adding liquidity again. And gold can go up 30, 40, 50% easily in a slowdown period. And so that would help act as a hedge to your assets, your equity that might not be doing so well. So I think gold has a role as that store of value and as a hedge to the legacy system. I think Bitcoin is somewhat of that, but again, this Bitcoin and the digital asset ecosystem is its own thing. It's growing exponentially, you know, at a much faster pace than anything else. And the one statistic that I always bring up, and people are very shocked when I say this, is that, you know, in the last 10 years, the S&P 500 is down 99% against Bitcoin. Okay? It's down 99% against Ethereum. So, and the same goes for all the assets in the fiat world. Now, okay, Bitcoin started at a very low price, but the point is that if you keep your wealth in that fiat system, it will lose purchasing power against what's going on in the digital asset world. And so the 10T portfolio is not a bet on one chain or one view, or it's a bet that this digital asset ecosystem is going to grow from 3 trillion to 30, I mean, or more. And so we want to own the companies that are core to the ecosystem, that are going to be there and grow along with it. It's a macro bet.
And we see as well now public companies allocating the part of their treasuries into Bitcoin, like Michael Saylor is the most famous
Yeah.
crypto Bitcoin bull, Tesla, block of Jack Dorsey, and etc. And as well, we see even countries adopting Bitcoin as a legal tender, as example of El Salvador or city of Lugano in Switzerland. So, what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I mean, this is all still early stage adoption. I mean, I think Saylor's been unbelievable for the space. He's a real shot of energy. He's very thoughtful. You know, look, he sticks to his guns. He has his one view, and I think that's great. And he's playing it that way, and he's a true believer, which is even better. I don't know that every company is going to follow his path. I mean, he's taken on a lot of leverage, but I actually think it's a pretty safe bet, the bet that he's taken. But do I think there'll be more countries, especially in the emerging world, that use Bitcoin as you know, their main currency? I think so, because look, it's very difficult to manage monetary and fiscal policy for any government entity or central bank. I mean, take a look at China, for instance. It's a big economy, right? They're still pegged to the dollar. And now they have some part that's pegged to the euro. But China doesn't even really manage its own monetary policy. It outsources some part of it to the Fed. So, you know, that's a, what is it, $15 trillion economy? I mean, it's crazy. So if someone that big can't even really manage its own monetary policy, how are some of these smaller countries, you know, and we've seen, of course, over the years, Argentina as a perfect example, and some of these other places that really are prone to making lots of mistakes when it comes to managing the currency. So if you take that human error component out of that, you know, I think it's going to be tremendous for potential growth in these countries, right? There won't be, I think you have capital flocking to areas, because what is a more stable monetary policy than Bitcoin's, you know, mathematically backed proof of work algorithm? So I think it's just early days. Yeah.
And how do you see crypto regulations worldwide? You're based in US, now we are here in France. And how do you see the differences between regulations and crypto environments?
Well, look, I mean, it's an interesting problem. I think that every country has its own set of rules. There's certain places that are very encouraging now. As you know, Singapore, you have Zug in Switzerland, you mentioned Lugano, you know, Puerto Rico is also becoming quite a hub. So there are places in the world where they're encouraging crypto businesses, crypto investors to reside, and Portugal is another place. So for every guy, for instance, like China, that comes out, I think foolishly last year and banned Bitcoin and banned Bitcoin mining, you have other places that see its value. So I think the development of regulation is very uneven. It seems to me France is pretty welcoming. You know, it seems, I heard CZ say the other day that he thinks France is a place where crypto and can blossom. So, but I'll tell you what, I don't think any one country will have any impact specifically, even the US. I mean, look, if I had said to you 18 months ago, China's going to ban Bitcoin and they're going to ban Bitcoin mining, what's that going to do to the price? Right? You would have said, oh, it would have been terrible, right?
Yeah.
The space has doubled in value since they made their announcement. So this is the most decentralized, bulletproof, most secure network of value ever created. So I think it's beyond sort of regulation that will clamp down on it. I do think, though, that, and I think the Americans are focusing on this, that if you create a playing field where there is clear regulation, that takes away a lot of risk. And the regulations don't have to be, you know, negative. They don't have to be, you know, overly controlling. They can just provide a framework. And so I think when that happens, you have massive capital come in because they say, okay, these are the rules. The problem now is no one knows what the rules are. And each country has different sets of rules. So I think it's just clarification that's going to help the space. Yeah.
And you mentioned the complete decentralization, but still we see there are a lot of whales in this industry or big miners who concentrated the whole hash rate. So still the market can be easily manipulated by them.
Yeah, I don't see that. No, I think the market is too big now. I mean, I've traded in the legacy markets, and you know, it takes a lot to manipulate a market. Bitcoin is $1 trillion asset now. There are too many players all around the world. And there's actually quite a diversity of players, very small to large, all over in every country in the world. I think maybe 5 years ago you might have been right, maybe, but I think it's so far beyond that. I don't really. Do you have any examples of market manipulation you want to share?
Actually, we were talking just before about Elon Musk, and last year in May, everybody blames him that he dumped the market with his tweet that they sold 10%
I know.
their holdings in Tesla, but obviously that's not true, but that was as well somehow connected.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's always short-term movements that are created by comments or, actions of individuals. Okay, but they're not sustainable if they're not consistent with the underlying fundamentals. Mm-hmm. So it's just noise for CNBC. One area, like for instance, did he really drive up Dogecoin? Now maybe he didn't himself, but the fact that he said he liked Doge, it drove it all the way up. But listen, Doge, I mean, to me is nonsense. But look, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I wouldn't, like you say, I'm risk averse. I love that.
For me, it's like a blue chip meme coin.
Right. Oh, for Doge is a blue chip.
Yes.
Yeah, for me, there's no such thing as a blue chip meme coin. I mean, it's just fun. I mean, if maybe you're buying it at a low level and you're waiting but again, there's so much retail involvement. Like, these are not people who've traded in the markets for long periods of time. And, I think the U.S. authorities are a little concerned about that. But I love it. I think it's a free market. I think it's might be the only truly free market out there. Currencies are manipulated by central banks. Interest rates are certainly manipulated by governments and central banks. Equities less so, but, if you want to own a blue chip meme coin, then that's wonderful. Good for you. And you do the research, you take your position, you suffer the consequences or claim the glory. I wonder for you, what's a third tier meme coin?
Third tier meme coin?
Yeah.
I'm not that much into meme coins.
Is SHIB a blue chip for you too?
Maybe after Dogecoin a bit too. Like, it turned out to be a blue chip.
I love that.
But
That's great.
It's like regulated exchange, Coinbase, Kraken started listing those meme coins.
Yeah.
And they in US, so it shows that they somehow verified it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a free market, and people are free to do what they like. And so, is there manipulation in less liquid, smaller, alternative cryptocurrencies? Mm-hmm. I guess, yeah. But I mean, you do that at your own peril, right? That's not, to me, that's not a long-term investment. I'm focused on, this as a structural change in the world that is a net positive, and that over the next 5, 6, 7 years, 10 years will, I think, grow to become, the dominant asset class. So